let me bring. I don't think George will mind if we play it again. So here's the commercial. Incredible Printing is begging you, please don't vote for Michelle Lujan Grisham. We're already last in everything. Don't vote for Michelle Lujan Grisham, please. This announcement paid for by Incredible Printing.
I'm Georgia Haynes, and I approve this message.
So there you go.
I think we could all get behind that message. So that's the best message I've heard this morning. Except for we might get rain. I mean,
yeah. Well, she had a birthday recently, and she was the KSVIP.
Okay.
And so I took that part where she says, I'm Georgia Haynes, and I approve that message.
Okay.
I put it at the end of her KSVIP.
I love it. That's awesome. So
well, and she's made a couple of the posters. We used to have one up in the window that said "Open Our State."
All right.
The yard signs, she made those.
Okay.
And there's a couple of others that she's made that are not very complimentary of our current chief executive.
We need a lot more folks like that to put messages out and get that. That's good for her.
Yeah.
Glad to hear that.
So happy to support her and
absolutely. So
spread the word. So, anyway, like last night I was kind of interested to see, because there's a little bit of quote unquote controversy in Ohio,
right,
over the Republican primary, for Senate. And there were 3 people running for that. Trump endorsed one of them.
Okay.
And apparently this guy was not very complimentary of Trump early on.
Right.
I don't think there were a lot of people that weren't very complimentary of Trump early on.
Yeah.
And but he has, supported Trump and Trump endorsed him. And so that got turned into a controversy.
Oh, and, yeah, but that's kind of, we've seen that all over, like you said, all over the place. And Ted Cruz, I mean, there's a lot of them that you could say probably weren't big Trump fans, but by the end.
Yeah. Well, Cruz probably had more of a reason not to like Trump than J.D. Vance did up in Ohio. I mean, Trump called him a liar.
Yeah.
Lying Ted Cruz. He picks up the Bible, and then when he lays it down, he lies.
Yeah.
And he kind of insinuated that his dad, Cruz's dad, was involved in the Lee Harvey Oswald and the Cubans.
Yeah. So there was a lot more there, and yet Ted even turned around. So,
So if anybody wanted to dislike Trump,
right,
Ted Cruz certainly had reason. That's why I'm really kind of surprised at the Bush family.
Yeah.
Because to this day,
they stayed pretty strong against him.
And anybody in the Bush family orbit. That's why Liz Cheney has gone off the rails. Because her dad was vice president. And there's a close association, and and all Trump did was say he was low energy Jeb.
Yeah. Wasn't much there. So, and took his chance away from being the next Bush. So
exactly. So I mean, but yeah, of all the people that have turned around and are supporters of Trump,
right,
Ted Cruz had the biggest reason not to do it. And, and he definitely, I think, supports Trump and would support him again.
And you don't have to support. I think that's where people get confused in politics across the board. You might not like a person, but if their policies match up with you and they're going to do what they say, that's kind of a good politician. Very, very, very rare do you see, especially on the federal level, that here's what I'm going to do, and they actually do what they said they were going to do. And so it's nice to see that. You don't have to love the person necessarily. I mean, I think people get that confused. Now, you don't want to elect a bad person. Don't get me wrong, but
or a corrupt person.
Yeah,
but you look at the words and then you look at their actions, and sometimes they're different. Well, most of the time they're different.
Right, sure.
They say this and they do this.
Yeah.
I was watching. I can't remember if it was a Gutfeld clip or not. It may have been a Gutfeld clip, and they were having a discussion because. To demonstrate how desperate the situation is for the Democrats in the general election this fall, the midterm, some have even suggested that Twitter needs to put Trump back on.
Right.
Because Trump will make so many people angry with his tweets that they will not look at inflation. They'll not look at the border. They'll not look at all these other issues that people are having to deal with right now.
Right.
They'll look at Trump's mean tweets and say, okay, we got to vote for Democrats because we don't want,
Yeah.
you know,
Because
mean
things
Trump.
are going so well and he's mean.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. And then they can't figure it out, you know. Then but they're great at spinning everything on everyone else's fault, right? Gas is up because of Putin, and oil companies won't drill, which we all know is incorrect. I mean, so no matter what and folks believe it. That's what terrifies me. If you look across the board, MLG, I know she's supposedly the most or least liked governor in the country, all that good stuff, but there's still a bunch that like her, and I'm like, how? What are y'all seeing that I'm not? Like, what did she bring to the table that was so amazing you think she's done? And I would say the same for the federal level, too. What have they done that's so amazing and brought to the table that y'all are like, we can get behind this? They really helped us here. I don't see anything in our country right now, unfortunately, that they've helped. And correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't. And it's kind of disappointing that people are still so far that way that they think, oh, we're going in the right direction. Really? I mean, a lot of recession thrown around all the time, inflation thrown around, gas prices. You might not be able to get the food you want. I mean,
no, it's kind of nerve-wracking.
Good job. I mean, let's do
Trump
that again.
does mean tweets.
But Trump is mean, so yeah, and calls people out. Well, darn it, that's wrong. Let's
do
pay
the other
$7 at the pump in California. Good for y'all.
Oh my gosh!
So
speaking of the oil and gas industry, as a county commissioner and mayor, but county commissioner today,
right? Yeah.
I'm sure you have conversations with or talk with some of the people that are in that industry.
Right.
What are you kind of hearing? What are they saying as far as the future and potential for that industry and potential growth here in Eddy County?
You know, I haven't heard anything a lot lately since last time. I know we've got some big meetings coming up with some new ones. Kind of what we said last time is the county manager thinks that they're going to be looking quite a bit at what's going on here. Obviously, policies, politics, all that stuff plays. And folks have to remember in the state of New Mexico, a lot of where they're drilling is federal and state land. So whereas in Texas and some of these other states where it's more private land, it's a little easier for them to push those investments to really start making growth because, and I can't remember exactly how many years it was, but, you know, I was talking to us a while back saying, you know, they're not planning out for the next 6 months. They're planning out for years. And so they want to make sure their investments are going to be able to happen. And so I think we really have to pay close attention to what politics are going to play in New Mexico and on the federal level that are going to affect those lands for them to help develop. I mean, I think you see an increase. And when we talk about the budget, we went over that yesterday. I think you'll see us thinking it's going to get better. I mean, we pushed some of our thoughts up a little bit, our numbers, but we didn't go as far as we could have gone because I think the uncertainty is there for us as well. I mean, we still stay pretty conservative. We're still $10 more than what we thought this last year, and we're seeing that growth. I think we're all watching as well to see, okay, what are y'all going to do? I mean, you're enjoying the money that's being sent now up there. You're spending it as fast as it's coming, so you really can't. They're going to have to really start being careful of what they're saying and doing because if they stop that money train somehow, it's really going to make it an interesting ride for them.
Lana had mentioned to me yesterday she saw a news story. I guess the state came out and said how much money they've taken in from pot in the first month of the pot sales, and I think it's like $55 million or something like that. Let me find the story before I throw out the wrong number. But whenever she told me the number, I said, well, how does that compare to one oil well?
Yeah.
Or something like that. In other words, it's not a number to sneeze at. I mean,
sure.
it's a significant number, but there's still an impression on the part of some people, it appears, up in the government that the these pop-ups that the oil and gas revenue is going to be replaced with things like revenue from pot sales, and I just don't see how that's even possible to do that. But the only thing I could think of is that they may want to really jump in on, depending on this, the news that came out from the leak at the Supreme Court,
Right.
is that maybe that'll be the next leg of our trifecta of replacement revenue for oil and gas. So we'll have wind and solar,
Right.
we'll have pot,
Yeah.
and then we'll have abortions. And that'll be the trifecta that will finally generate enough revenue for the state of New Mexico that we can finally kiss the oil and gas industry goodbye.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty sad state when that's what you're
pretty sad. Well, and if you remember when that bill went through, was that 2 sessions ago, the abortion bill, or 3 sessions ago? It was disgusting to listen to it argued on the floor. Some of the comments made by the Democratic side made me sick at why they think that was such a great deal. But we already lead in all of that stuff, and so it's kind of sad that you're right. That New Mexico, that's how we make our dollars. Okay, good for y'all. And then the film industry, which obviously has been proven wrong a number of times, but they say it, and so people that don't pay attention to anything else in the world and just believe everything the Democrats say, we're making a ton off of films. Well, not really, because after you give them all the tax credit, everything that we give them back, we're probably losing money on those, or just barely breaking even. So, and I would say the same thing for the pot. People are looking at, it's 55 million, if that's the number.
Yeah.
Well, great. But what are we it's going to take us 3 to 4 years to recoup everything they had to spend to get that thing going. And you got to look, when states first put in marijuana, I'd love to know how that compares to some of these other states when they first legalized it. They have a big pop in it, obviously, because, it's legal, let's all go do it once. And then what is that decline? So I would be curious, over the long haul, tell us the real story. I mean, when Colorado legalized it, I'm sure we saw a big jump because New Mexico drove there, all the states around them. Well, New Mexico didn't have quite as big a pool as they would, because Colorado's not going to drive to New Mexico. I don't know if it's legal in Arizona or not.
right. Yeah, it's hard to know.
But it is not in Texas, so I'm sure that helped those sales quite a bit. I know there were a lot of stores that popped up. My wife goes to Clovis quite often, and she said there was a lot in Clovis. Apparently Carlsbad has a bunch. Someone was saying they've got 8, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, I heard that on
that's a lot.
8 have been approved, and we're trying to think.
Right.
We were trying to think of other than Mexican restaurants.
Yeah, it's a good comparison.
What else do we have that is a product line that there is at least 8 of?
Right. Yeah.
Trying to get business in an area. So
I don't understand how the competition works. I don't understand any of that stuff. But so I'd be curious. I mean, I think they can celebrate that number if they want to try, and obviously they'll try because they've got to make it look good. But let's compare apples to apples and give us a true snapshot. And since they're not, that kind of tells me the snapshot isn't near what maybe they thought it was going to be.
What it was going to be.
So let's celebrate that number and steer you away from what has happened in other states and what is the longevity of this number.
Sure. So the county commissioners talked about the budget. You're in the budget process right now.
Yep, we sure did.
So what were some of the things that were talked about yesterday regarding
some
the budget?
of the big highlights, and I mean, so yesterday we did pass the interim budget approval, so that means it's gone through the first stage. We can send it off to make sure it gets approved. It looks like a really great budget. I'm kind of excited about it. Total revenue, we're going to increase it. We're thinking we're going to end up somewhere around 142 million, almost 143 million, so that's a lot, obviously. A lot of that due to oil and gas, so thanks again to oil and gas for making Eddy County so successful. Some of the things that they thought we'd see a big increase in property tax. And I think people need to realize what that is. And sometimes people think, you're increasing property tax. No, that's not what that means. It means you take vacant land and turn it into houses or businesses or things like that, and you start having development on it. that property will increase because the value of it has increased. So we're thinking we'll see another little over $3 million increase in development and movement, which is good for the county, good for the cities, because that means things are happening. Hopefully houses are being built and new businesses are coming on. But the big one, we put an extra $11 million in oil and gas, which is production and equipment. And that's what I was referencing. This year we had it $50 price per barrel. We did push it all the way to $60. We have been averaging $70 a barrel for the last quite a few months. We're not really comfortable pushing it to the 70 just because of what we said earlier, that volatility in the state and on the federal land. So we wanted to stay somewhat conservative to make sure we don't get in trouble halfway through the year. So we kept it at 60 million, and they kept the volume at 13 million. We've been averaging about 17 million. So again, making sure we're a little conservative and not trying to match, which we would never, that wouldn't make a lot of sense, because then if anything goes one way or the other, you're in, well, up would be okay, but down would be bad quick. So real glad to see how they budget that. Roberta and Al just do an incredible, obviously Al, being from oil and gas, really understands it, and Roberta is just amazing at what she does. So when you put those two minds together, you get a budget that you're very comfortable with. We feel very confident in. The parts we grew, that a lot of folks, obviously you hate to see government grow. Some of the things, and I think we've talked about it a little bit, we did in the interim approve the 21 fire services, one assessor, and one facility. So those fire services are the new volunteers, the wrong word, obviously, the new fire department for the county. We'll have two paid fire departments, one on the north, one on the south, to kind of help alleviate. We're not getting as many volunteers. They still do an amazing job, and we couldn't, even with this, we can't survive without the volunteers. This is to help come alongside them and support them. Make sure that when a fire happens, we can get there. We've got folks on hand to get there, and then the volunteers, like I said, just help and support and get those things put out.
So is this two in each part of the county, or two total county employees that will be running these, managing these fire departments?
It's 21 people total. So
21 people?
Full staff, two full staffs.
So the county is creating a fire department.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
So we will
21 people will be hired on staff as firefighters.
It'll be every shift will be covered all day, all night. So
okay. So what happens to the volunteer fire departments? Like there's Sun Country, there's
nothing
Riverside, there's all, Atoka.
Yeah, no, like I said, we still 100%, we're still dependent upon them, and their role is critical to the county, because the county we couldn't afford to have the kind of fire department you'd have to cover the whole county. So, no, those are still crucial roles, and I think that's what we want to make folks understand is we're not replacing volunteers. We're not trying to get away from volunteers. They play a crucial part. I think you see across the board, maybe the not just in fire departments, volunteers across the board and everything. It's getting harder. You're working more. You're doing this. There's a lot more going on. So many of them can't. Whereas back in the good old days, right? It's everybody went, and now it's
ring the bell and everybody shows
and everyone
up.
in town went. But so they've got a little harder trying to get all the folks they need. Not their fault. It's a product of where we're at. So this is to help that, make sure we respond, and then, like I said, the volunteers are there as well. We can't do this without them, and they need to understand that as well.
Will the county then be building fire buildings and housing equipment in there, or will they be working out of the volunteer fire offices? Because there's some pretty nice upgrades that have been done
Absolutely.
to the volunteer fire department facilities over the last few years.
Yeah, no, and we're going to have to upgrade some more of our facilities in the sense of, because there'll have to be places to sleep. Bringing on a full crew, you're going to have more things that a department's going to need, which most of I don't think any of our departments have had to do that, obviously, to this point. Like you said, we've got some beautiful new buildings. They don't have sleeping quarters. So we're going to have to make some big improvements to help accommodate what we're doing. I think it's in the budget. They've already got one that they're working on, trying to make sure they've got it. and they've located these in spots where it'll really help that ISO score for the city and for the county, which.
Well, that's I guess leads to the next question: is there a long-range benefit? I mean, other than just being able to coordinate and have people to put the fires out when the fires happen,
right?
Is there some other benefit that residents of the county could see from having, in essence, a full-time county fire department?
Yeah. Obviously, with that ISO score, and what that means is that affects your insurance rates. Now, and I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. But when you respond to a fire, I think the ISO counts a volunteer for every paid fire person that shows up. It takes 3 volunteers to count for 1. I think that's the number. I think it's 3. So by having a paid crew, the second you get there, it's 111, and then anything else is going to be. So that's going to bring that ISO right away up. And that helps both sides. It'll help the city, both cities, because if we respond to the city, it's a 1-to-1 and not a 3-to-1. So that should help with our insurance rates quite a bit. We've already got pretty good. I mean, our ISO scores aren't bad anyways, because we do have such a good group that are able to show up most of the time. This is just going to reinforce that and make sure that we are always showing up and get that full credit for that full fire. So,
well, and I'm assuming this came up in the discussion with the commissioners too, because we already know about the competition, if you will,
right,
between City of Carlsbad Police, Artesia Police, Sheriff's Department over qualified officers to fill those positions. Have you heard from, say, the fire chief in Artesia or the fire chief in Carlsbad, and what their thoughts are on how this might impact their ability to hire and retain firefighters for the city departments? Is this another competitor, if you will, in that arena?
Sure, and it obviously is another competitor in the arena, right? Because we've added another department. I think both. I haven't talked as much, obviously, to Carlsbad as I have to Artesia. I think they also see the value of you've got another group out there to help. Now, we're going to have to make sure all the pay is competitive, that we can reach everybody, both departments, because obviously the goal, and I've always said that, I know some people argue it this way or that way, but if the sheriff department or Artesia Police or Carlsbad Police is getting everybody from everyone else, well, that doesn't help Eddy County, right? Because we're just taking it from one pot, moving it to another part within the county. So we need to make sure that our pay is right, that we're competitive with each other, and we need not to pick from each other and say, hey, come over here. That doesn't help us. Let's go find somewhere else and bring them in.
In a perfect situation, this would be 21 new people.
Yeah.
In addition to the people that are already working in fire and rescue in Eddy County.
And some folks say, well, just don't let them. Well, that's wrong too. I mean, it's a free market, but you can't restrict. I don't think you should be able to restrict your employees and say you can't. What if that's where they've always wanted to? Fire department's a little different, but what if they've always wanted to be a Artesia police officer and they work for the sheriff's office, or vice versa? What if they've always wanted to be a deputy sheriff and they started? You can't tell someone, no, sorry, that doesn't work that way. That's wrong too. We just got to make sure that we support them all across the board, and then hopefully we can balance that out and not have that problem as much.
So, well, this is a pretty big expenditure. What part of the budget, or how much is the county looking at spending on creating this?
It'll be about $5 million is what it's going to be. So it's a.
And, is that to create it, or is that going to be what the county?
No, that's to continue it. So it's about a $5 million hit is what we'll see. Obviously, that'll change a little bit as raises. I mean, all that stuff happens, but we don't expect it to be a massive growth after that. And I was one to always think we would never need to get here, but looking at how responses and all that stuff, obviously we have got here, and I fully understood it once we had the full picture. I thought, well, we really don't have a choice. I mean, that's part of what we're charged with doing is security and safety of the county. Well, we've got to make sure we're upholding our end, and this will help that. So.
Well, there's been an awful lot of growth, Carlsbad and Artesia, just outside the city limits.
Yes.
You and the mayor talked about the subdivision, north of town, that's in the county.
Yeah.
That both the county and the city, signed off on.
Right.
But that's an example of a development that's in the county.
Yeah.
That if there isn't this kind of support from the county when it comes to firefighting, City of Artesia firefighters would most likely be the ones that would have to respond.
Right.
And they're going to look at it and say, well, they're not even city residents.
Yeah.
And I know there's some transfer of funds to help compensate. There are some agreements that
Right. Yeah.
compensate between the cities and the counties for those types of services that are provided. But
Absolutely.
But this would be one actual, here's our firefighters that are helping the city firefighters and
Right.
making sure that this area is protected. Is that kind of what you see?
And that's exactly right. I mean, obviously, the oil field doesn't change a lot, and that's why some folks say, well, why do you have so much equipment? Well, that's very special out there, right? You got batteries, you got all these different kinds of fires. They need different equipment. But you're right. If you just look around Artesia, look at our developments that are just right outside the city limits, but they're pretty big subdivisions. You have one up on 13th that, when you get into that Painted Pony, Walnut, all that area, nice houses, great neighborhoods, but there's growth. This new subdivision next to it's already a subdivision. You've got some really big growth in neighborhoods right outside the city limits that do fall in the county, and so it should be the county's responsibility. So you're absolutely right. If you look at how the cities are growing, where people are popping up, it's our duty to make sure that they are protected, and that's what, in essence, what we have to do. So
because they're going to be protected either by a county or by the volunteer fire
Right.
departments. They're either going to have to be enhanced or upgraded in order to meet the need that may arise. And well, that's interesting. Was this a unanimous support for this?
It was unanimous support. Like I said, when we first had our first meeting, it was a while back, I think we were all kind of, why?
Mm-hmm.
But then, I mean, they did a really good job of, and the chief from Artesia was there to kind of help us understand how it would affect them. And so they did a good job of presenting it, helping us understand, showing the need, and not just saying, hey, we just have to do this because, okay, well, because what? They actually answered our because whys before we had to ask the because why.
Mm-hmm.
So I was real proud of how they handled it and how they've looked at it. They didn't go overboard. They didn't try to come up with, hey, we need 42 because we have to have 4. I mean, they said, here's where we really need to start. We think we can, with the volunteers, we can make this work this way.
Mm-hmm.
That way it's not such a big hit, because they could have come in and asked for a bigger one just because you see the growth. I mean, and maybe someday if we continue to grow, which is a good problem.
Yeah.
But if we grow, that means the tax base, the GRTs, everything grows as well. So obviously that's the way to grow your budget and your economy, is making sure that we're keeping up with what's happening. And I think that's what this is. This is the start to, we're keeping up with what's happening.
Okay.
What happens in 5-10 years, I have no idea. But on this same growth
If it
path,
continues to grow,
it's a good problem. I mean, obviously you don't want to become stale, because then typically you go in reverse pretty quick. So so that growth is great. I think this is a good way for us to help support it and continue to make sure our citizens are safe.
Well, got a new fire department coming, the Eddy County Fire Department.
Yeah,
So
it's a coming.
good deal.